I'm just about to reveal how regular people make impressive amounts of money by renting out properties on Airbnb with the help of a really interesting business model called Airbnb arbitrage. So let's get started. And the first thing we need to understand here is the concept of price arbitrage. But there's nothing difficult about it. It's a no-brainer. We're talking about purchasing a certain product for a specific price, let's say $1 from a specific store, and then reselling it for a higher price in a different place, right? Thus making a 25-cent profit in the process. And at the end of the day, that is the fundamental concept behind Airbnb arbitrage as well. But it's gonna be a little bit more complicated than that. So here's what you're actually doing. You're basically renting a property from the owner long-term and then listing it on platforms such as Airbnb for short-term rental, thus making a profit in the process. In other words, it's a business model that focuses on leveraging other people's properties, and that's the keyword here. These are other people's properties, which means that you don't have to take out a loan, you don't have to go in debt, purchasing property and listing it on Airbnb. And then you just have to sign a sublease agreement, as it's called, but more on that later. Let's not get lost in the technicalities for now. And eventually you get to rent those properties on platforms such as Airbnb. There are some alternatives as well, but Airbnb is by far the most popular option, so let's just stick to that for the sake of simplicity. In essence, you're gonna rent properties from the long-term market and resell them on the short-term marketplace. And what really stands out here among the benefits is the fact that there is little upfront investment needed. Think about it for a second. Since you're not buying property, you do not need to outlay thousands of dollars for a down payment. So the upfront investment is minimal. All you may have to do is just invest a little bit of money into refurnishing that apartment if you don't really like the way it looks, pay your first month's rent. You may also need to pay a damage deposit just in case something happens, and you're pretty much all set. Not only that, but there is very little risk involved because you do not own the property. So if the roof needs to be replaced, it's on the landlord to fix it. It's not your property, right? And if the property doesn't really work out to generate enough bookings, then you can just walk away from the lease. Not only that, but thanks to the little upfront investment, you can also scale rather quickly because it doesn't take hundreds of thousands of dollars to get another property. All you gotta do is sign another contract with the same landowner or a different one and keep listing your properties on Airbnb. And there's also less bookkeeping headache. If you think about it, landlords have to manage and pay multiple expenses, fees, mortgage, utilities, maintenance, and a lot of other stuff, while you only have to pay one monthly fee, and that is your rent. That's it. Now, the only real risk involved here is not being able to get enough bookings in a month so that you have to pay more as rent than you're actually making. But any business model comes with a specific risk, so you have to do the math and take that into account. And here's the thing about it. That is a fixed fee that you have to pay no matter what happens. I mean, whether you made any bookings or not, your landlord doesn't really care about that. They still expect you to pay the rent on a monthly basis because you've signed an agreement, you've signed a contract. So if you're late to pay or you avoid paying altogether, you may face charges, eviction, or in some cases, even lawsuits. But most of the times, you can actually work it out with the owner. Now, if you happen to have some rude guests and they cause any sort of damage to the property, then it's on you to take care of the repairs. However, in some cases, depending on the contract you have, and there's a whole discussion to be had here, Airbnb and or your insurance provider may actually help cover the costs. But again, that depends on the strategy you choose to implement. Now, one thing that people do not take into account here, and that is a shame, is the fact that you do need to sign an agreement with the owner. The landowner needs to know that you're actually renting out the property as well, right? And that is why that sublease agreement is so important. You cannot just rent out the apartment and then list it on Airbnb without them knowing about it, because that is not legal. That's why your paperwork needs to be on point as well. But now guys, let's just take a look at this. Let's just imagine this scenario and try to understand what kind of profits we're talking about. For instance, let's say that you've just rented out a property and your first month's rent is about $1,000. You will have to give the landowner a damage deposit of about $500, and you might need to invest a little bit more into furniture and decor. In total, we're talking about $5,000. And so here are the annual operating expenses based on that. And you can also add the utilities, maintenance, cleaners pay to your list of expenses. You need to take those into account as well because they will eventually add up. Now, it is not unusual to get an annual revenue of about $22,000 in bookings. And so, according to this calculation, we're talking about a 98% annual ROI. But now guys, again, this is not necessarily passive income. It's an entire business model in and of itself, so you will actually need to do some work. Each and every single step of the process will have its difficulties. I'm talking about adding furniture, which is going to be quite a headache, then dealing with guests who might not always be the most polite ones, and also maintaining your landowner's trust. That is also an important element here. But at the end of the day, it genuinely looks like a pretty good long-term opportunity. It's not gonna make you rich overnight, but it's a genuine business model and it makes sense. However, you do need to take something else into account, and that is the demand and your location. Not any location will be profitable. You need to make sure that there is a demand for Airbnb properties in your specific location. People are actually searching for that, and they are renting out properties as we speak for the short term. Otherwise, you will just end up paying more for rent than you're actually making. Thus, this is not a profitable investment. And I want you guys to take a look at this article. I don't just want to cover the pros here. I also want to take a look at the cons, especially the less obvious disadvantages of the business model. For instance, here's one of them. You see, according to this article over at travelnoir.com, too many rich people invested in Airbnbs and more than 1 million of them remain unoccupied. This is a pretty recent article, and according to this one, short-term rental listings increased significantly to 1.38 million in September, according to AirDNA. By the way, guys, if you're seriously considering starting this business model, AirDNA might actually be your best friend. It's one of the best websites, one of the best tools you can use in order to get an idea of what the demand is like in your specific area. For instance, I could search for a city right here, and this website will show me a lot of insightful data. All you gotta do is look up the name of the city, and then the website will display metrics such as the rental demand, the average daily rate, and the occupancy rate, which is a really important one. And I'm sure you can find a bunch of tutorials that will go in depth about how you can make use of AirDNA to make sure that your location is suitable for Airbnb arbitrage. Remember, not any city is suitable for this business model. It all boils down to the demand, right? And we've just seen how this business model can actually go wrong if there's no demand for Airbnb properties. A lot of them are still sitting empty, and that is a shame, really. And so if you genuinely want to make this work, your best weapon in this case is going to be staying informed. And luckily, there's a lot of information out there that you can access for free. There are a bunch of people offering great information on all social media platforms. And I'm talking about Instagram, TikTok. And if you want somebody to actually hold your hand and walk you through the process, there are coaching programs out there as well. But as I'm sure you know, whenever we're talking about coaching programs, these are not cheap. We're talking about a 4-figure investment at least. So you may want to do the math here and really decide for yourself whether you want somebody else to help you or you think you can manage it on your own. But the bottom line is this: Airbnb arbitrage is not necessarily a business model that you go for after watching a 10-minute video on YouTube. You need to do your own due diligence because we're talking about a significant investment still, and really understand what's going on and what you're doing. But at least at this point, after watching this video, you should understand the fundamentals of rental arbitrage and how you can take advantage of the business model in 2022 and beyond. So that's it for now, and thanks for watching.